President Trump is diagnosed with chronic venous insufficiency. What the heck is it? Well, nothing serious, but it does explain some recent pictures circulating online. Plus, mega deal. That's how Ukraine's President Zelensky described an agreement for the U.S. to buy battle-tested Ukrainian drones. We have more from the Post's exclusive interview. And covert canoodling. A tech CEO and his head of HR exposed at a Coldplay concert by Chris Martin himself. You're gonna want to hear this one. Those stories and more today, Friday, July 18th. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. No special prosecutor for the Epstein case. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt made the announcement during her weekly press briefing Thursday, noting simply, that's how the president feels. Now, Trump put the official kibosh on deep diving into Epstein Gate in response to growing calls from both sides of the political aisle for further investigation. The loudest of which comes from a faction of the president's own base who believe a conspiracy is afoot. They're demanding the release of the Epstein files and even the resignation of Attorney General Pam Bondi. Speaking of releases, the White House says that President Trump would welcome the release of any additional credible information relating to the case. Credible being the operative word here. But the administration does remain firm in their stance that the Department of Justice was tasked with a thorough review, they completed it, and released a memo with their findings, case closed. Now over to a presidential medical update. President Trump has been diagnosed with something called chronic venous insufficiency. In layman's terms, cankles, or at least it's one possible cause of cankles. Here's how Caroline Leavitt described it.
In recent weeks, President Trump noted mild swelling in his lower legs. In keeping with routine medical care and out of an abundance of caution, this concern was thoroughly evaluated by the White House Medical Unit. Bilateral lower extremity venous Doppler ultrasounds were performed and revealed chronic venous insufficiency, a benign and common condition, particularly in individuals over the age of 70.
In addition to that common ailment, Leavitt noted media concern over recent photos showing bruising on the back of President Trump's hand that appeared to be covered up with makeup. Doctors said this was from a combination of frequent handshaking and the use of aspirin, part of, quote, standard cardiovascular prevention, which the president apparently diligently takes, probably with a Diet Coke since that is his beverage of choice. Now over to a presidential medical update, only this time, different president. The House Oversight Committee is bringing in 4 former Biden aides for questioning as part of an investigation into an alleged cover-up of the ex-president's mental decline. Biden's chief of staff, Jeff Zients, press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, and 2 other advisors have all been asked to sit for interviews. So to be clear, not a full hearing. Zients in particular has been in the news this week. We discussed it on this very podcast after the New York Times reported he authorized the use of the auto pen to sign last-minute presidential pardons and commutations hours before Biden left office. Now, this committee has already interviewed 4 other Biden aides, 2 of whom you'll remember pleaded the Fifth, refusing to answer questions. Now, our big story, the Post's exclusive interview with Volodymyr Zelensky. The Ukrainian president sat down for a wide-ranging conversation with our own Caitlin Dornbos. And in it, Zelensky revealed that during his latest talks with President Trump, the two discussed a massive weapons exchange deal.
We spoke with Mr. President that we will work on a serious agreement so that Ukraine can sell to the United States of America a big number of drones.
He went on to call the agreement a mega deal and a win-win for both countries. Now, despite being the most powerful military on the globe, U.S. drone tech lags behind the likes of China and Russia. So buying proven versions from Ukraine would be transformative for the U.S. armed forces. Zelensky also talked about how President Trump has the potential to bring the Kremlin to its knees through sanctions that, as he put it, would cause a social explosion in Russia. For more on all of this from the Ukraine, Caitlin now joins me. Caitlin, I need to know what Zelensky meant, though, by a social explosion, and how does he think the U.S. can really help end this war?
Absolutely. President Zelensky was really talking about the key things that motivate President Putin in Russia, and that is staying in power and growing his power. That's the whole reason why he launched this war in the first place. His main goal is to reform the Soviet Union. So when you go after the things that Putin doesn't want to happen, and that would be losing the power, losing the love of his people by showing him the consequences of his actions by continuing this war. That is how you get Putin to the bargaining table, because right now he just doesn't want to end this war. There's no willingness to do so.
So what does President Zelensky think of President Trump's announcement this week of that 50-day deadline?
Yeah, he was so grateful. Oh my gosh. It was so inspiring to see this love for Trump and the US coming from Zelensky, and this enthusiasm of gratitude that President Trump has decided that sanctions are a really good possibility to bring Putin to the table. But on the same hand, he is worn from this war and he wants it to end. I was really struck by how honestly tired he was when he would get passionate when he was talking about his country, but he wants this war to end. And 50 days is a long time when every single night you're not getting a night's rest because air alarms are going off. Frankly, I'm pretty surprised that I'm able to join you right now and I'm not in a shelter, because that is how frequent these drones are in Kyiv. And so he said, 50 days, just one day here with the war continuing is torture. So why are we continuing this for another 2 months unnecessarily?
And I want to point out for people who are listening or watching right now that for a second there, your sound sort of dropped out. And it's just a reminder that you are in Ukraine in this war zone. And you noted how tired he looked. And that's something you could really only ascertain from being in the room there. I want to pivot a little bit, though, to former Russian president and the current chair of the country's Security Council. He essentially threatened the West with attacks, maybe even a preemptive one, if they wade deeper into the Russia-Ukraine war. What is Russia really capable of in that regard, and should we legitimately be concerned?
Well, I think we've got to look at the fact that Ukraine has done the world a favor in really wearing down the Russian military. Had the Russian military been capable of or wanted to attack NATO or even the United States back 3.5 years ago, they would have had their best fighters on the front line. They would have had plenty of their best weapons. But now Russia's running out of weapons. They're running out of their expertise in their war fighters. Off the street and throwing them into the front line as a warm body. So the threat of Russia is already reduced. In addition to that, there is it's incredibly unlikely that Russia would attack a NATO member of the state. You've got to look at this alliance as really a strong, solid deterrent for Russia to, not strike, because if they strike NATO, the entire alliance will come and attack Russia back.
Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us today, all the way from Ukraine. I know it is probably tough for you to be able to do this, and I really want to encourage everyone to go to the New York Post and check out more on your sit down with Volodymyr Zelensky.
Thank you so much.
Kiss cam chaos at a Coldplay concert. He never meant to cause them trouble, but Coldplay's Chris Martin seems to have outed a couple doing, well, something maybe they shouldn't have been doing. Andy Byron, the CEO of AI and data company Astronomer, was cuddling with his date at a concert in Massachusetts this week when the happy couple came up on the kiss cam. Instead of the obligatory Jumbotron smooch the crowd was expecting, what they got were two horrified, guilty faces doing anything to get the heck off camera. The caught in the act moment was so obvious, even frontman Chris Martin noticed.
Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
Welp, you might be on to something there, Chris. The woman in question is Kristen Cabot, Chief Human Resources Officer at Astronomer, and not a Mrs. Byron. Now, their respective marital statuses are unclear. Maybe they're consciously uncoupled, but crystal clear their professional relationship status. Head of the company, head of the company's HR. And we probably wouldn't even be talking about this if they didn't look like they were literally caught with their hands in the cookie jar. The cover-up, always worse than the crime. And finally today, vaping can mess up your baby's head. Yes, you heard that right. Babies and vapes, Not a great pairing. Vaping while pregnant, even if the vape has no nicotine in it, can alter the shape of a fetus's skull. According to a new study, the culprit here is two ingredients used in vapes to create the throat hit and the smoke plume. And when scientists tested the chemicals on pregnant mice, the babies that were born had lower birth weights, shortened skulls, and narrower facial features. Sad for the mice and sad for the potential human vape babies. The results even surprised the researchers at Ohio State University Medical School because the whole marketing push of vaping is that it's a safer alternative to smoking. Maybe not. And the study comes just as the FDA authorized the sale of one of the most popular e-cigarette brands after 3 years in regulatory purgatory. Yes, Juul is back. The popular brand was effectively banned by the FDA in 2022 over a lack of company data about potentially harmful ingredients in their products. Now, the new approval of 5 Juul products comes after the company provided new data that the public health benefits of vaping outweighed the risks. I guess no one consulted the good doctors at Ohio State. What a roller coaster of stories we have been on today. Vapes, possible affairs, outed by British rock stars. It is what you love about the New York Post. So spend your weekend checking us out in print or online, and let's go on another wild news journey together on Monday. So like and subscribe to the New York Postcast wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Until then, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday.